Hello and welcome back. I am Macy Morris and this is part 1 of our Read With Me series. This month we're reading I'm Still Here, or Je Suis Là, by Clelie Avit. And I've already gotten started with some notes. I'm super excited. So if you recall, for part 1, week 1, you were supposed to read chapters 1 through 5, which I think came out to 61 pages. So let's break it down. Characters first. First we have Elsa, who is our main protagonist. She's in the hospital, in a coma, had a glacier mountain climbing incident where she fell and now she's in a coma. So she's been in this coma for going on 5 months now, but has only been able to hear for about 6 weeks, and she's basically counting her days by people coming in and out, and that's how she's counting her days, because she can't see or move or anything, but she can hear, and that's pretty much it. So, and then our male protagonist, Tybalt, I think that's how you say his name, not how you say it. I'm sorry, because that's how I'm gonna say it for the rest of the time. So anyway, we have Tybalt. He's this 35-year-old guy. He's in the hospital because his brother is there. We'll kind of get more into that. But he's in the hospital because his brother's there, and he's some kind of earth scientist. I don't know. His job doesn't seem that important to the plot of the story, to be honest. The only thing I can really tell you about him so far is that he's been through this weird long-term relationship breakup with this chick named Cindy, and he likes to invade people's personal space, which we will get to in a little bit. Next up is our side characters. We have Steve, Alex, and Rebecca. Now, Steve is the typical best friend of the girl, and we all know that he's madly in love with her, but she doesn't know that he's madly in love with her, and it's just obnoxious. And then Alex and Rebecca are just 2 more of our main character Elsa's friends, who I think their only character trait is that Alex and Rebecca are in a relationship with each other, and that's really their only trait in this book so far. So that's about it. So that's it for Elsa's friends. And then you have Elsa's sister named Pauline, who we meet, I think, in chapter 1. She's 25 years old. She's kind of still a teenager in her mindset. I don't know. She's described as kind of immature, and she's an art major, which kind of ties in because she describes a lot of things to Elsa, which is nice. Like, I thought that was a nice detail because Elsa obviously can't see anything. She can only hear, so sometimes her sister kind of describes things for her, which I think is really interesting in that aspect. The only other description it gives of her is that apparently she has a different boyfriend every week, and the one detail that I found kind of disturbing was apparently she makes out with her boyfriends in the hospital room. My sister's boyfriends don't speak, or they stay out in the corridor. The only thing I hear from them eventually is the inevitable sound of their saliva being exchanged with my sister's. So yeah, apparently Pauline ekes out in her unconscious sister's hospital room. It's cool. It's normal. We're moving on. Okay, now we have Tybalt's best friend, whose name is Julian. We don't really hear much about him. We meet him vaguely, I think, in chapter 4, which we'll go over a little later, but really his only characteristics is that he once was a workaholic and now he has a child and a wife, and that's basically about it. That's his personality, and his wife's name's Gail, and we really don't hear anything about her either, so moving on. Okay, so here is my next favorite part about the characters. So, we have Tybalt's brother, who is only referred to as his brother and does not have a name, which I just find very interesting, that he's kind of a major plot point, like he's the whole reason Tybalt's there, but he doesn't have a name. So the only thing that we really know about him so far was that he was drunk and he was driving and apparently killed 2 teenage girls while he was driving. I think he hit them or something. But there was this big accident, and that's why he's in the hospital. And then we are introduced to Tybalt's mother, which is only known as his mother, also does not have a name, because why would she? Names aren't important. Whatever. And then we have Tybalt's cousin. Yep. That's all that he's introduced as, folks. Tybalt's cousin. That's what his name is. His name is Tybalt's cousin, because apparently He doesn't need a name, even though he comes up multiple times in the story. I don't know, we're only 5 chapters in, maybe he's not important later on, but that's all that he's referred to. And honestly, he really doesn't have any other character trait other than to tell Tybalt off and to tell him that he's selfish and all this other stuff, so not important enough for a name. Alright. And one more thing I forgot, because it's just so easy to forget. Elsa's parents, who also don't have a name and show up like once and for a very small amount of time. You'll see. Let's move on. Okay, so we're getting into plot. Now, the story opens from Elsa's point of view, and Elsa's in her hospital bed. She's been in a coma for 5 months, has only been able to hear people for about 6 weeks, and other than that, she's just laying there, unable to speak or communicate or anything to basically let people know that she's conscious, like, on the inside. So basically, she just spends her days, like, imagining things and in her own head and trying to listen to the people that come into her room, and she's using that as kind of a, you know, days are passing kind of thing and knowing how long she's been awake. As we move a little bit forward, then we finally get introduced to the incident, as I shall refer to it, where she gets injured. Basically, what went wrong is that she tied one of the knots wrong, and it caused her to fall a very large distance. Yeah, she had to be flown out and everything, but she was unconscious for it, and she's been unconscious since that incident. And basically that's how chapter 1 ends off, is introducing us to our main character and basically just giving us an idea of how she ended up there. Moving into chapter 2, it was automatic drama. Like, automatic yelling at each other. It was Tybalt and his cousin, because he doesn't have a name. It was Tybalt and his cousin, and they were yelling at each other because Tybalt would not go into his brother's room, because, God forbid, he's very angry at his brother because of everything that happened, so has basically disowned him as a family member. So they're having an argument about that in the hallway. Now we're getting to the part where our characters meet. I am confusion. Because I don't like it. It's not like he was trying to hide from someone and kind of just, whoops, wrong room. He literally walked out into the staircase or something to get some me time, and then walked back in, I think, and going to try to find his brother's room. I don't know, it's not very well explained. And he just walks into this person's room, and instead of, like, walking in and going, oh, wrong room, he goes, wonder why that person didn't wake up. Kind of leans over, is like, it's a chick. Checks himself out in the mirror a little bit, and then just walks over to the other side and just plans like, I think I'm gonna stay here for a little while. And then he's like, well, since I'm in here, might as well check her chart. Leans over, looks at her medical information that's on her chart in there to find out her name, how old she is, and her injury, like why she's in there. And he finds out that she's in a coma, and he's like, oh, that's why you didn't wake up. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, it just so happens to be her birthday. 'Cause why wouldn't it? 'Cause why wouldn't it be? 'Cause why wouldn't it be? 'Cause why wouldn't it be? Oh, it's her birthday, and he, like, decides to examine her closer. I don't know, because she smells like jasmine, and I have to lean in closer. Someone help. Okay. And then next, it says, I look at her again. Something about her is making me uncomfortable, and after a moment, I know what it is. Being linked up to all these machines demeans her somehow. If I disconnected it all, she'd look almost like a jasmine flower with the smell to match. To disconnect or not to disconnect? That is the question. What? 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 If he disconnects the tubes, she'll die. Like, what? What? I'm sorry. Moving on, just a couple of lines further down, he goes, look how pretty you are. You deserve a birthday kiss. My words surprise me, but I've already started moving aside the tubes that block the way to her cheek. Up close, the smell of jasmine is very distinct. I put my lips on her warm cheek, and it gives me something like an electric shock. It's been a year since I last gave someone a kiss, except for greeting work colleagues or friends, but that doesn't count. There's nothing especially sensual in what I've just done, but it was a stolen kiss from the cheek of an unsuspecting woman. The idea makes me smile, and I stand back. Excuse me, what? I just want to point out that the book's author is from France, and I don't know if it's like a European thing where, you know, people come up and like kiss each other on the cheek, you know, but that's not okay. You're just alone in a hospital room with a chick you don't know who's in a coma, and you're like, let me give you a kiss. No. After our main protagonist kisses our other protagonist on the cheek, ew, he decides to fall asleep in the hospital room of the person that he does not know because it's raining outside. So what else is he gonna do? I don't know. Wait in a waiting room? So he falls asleep in the room, and her friends, Steve, Alex, and Rebecca, come to celebrate with her because it's her birthday. Coincidentally. And they come to celebrate with her, and they walk in and see this guy sleeping. And the one guy, Steve, who is obviously in love with Elsa, wakes him up, is like, who are you? Gets super angry, like pulls him up by the collar from the seat and gets super defensive. And Elsa, in her mind, is just like, a big brother's gotta protect his sister because she's, you know, convinced that he only looks at her in a brotherly way. Because what else would a protagonist do? Anyway, that drama resolves pretty quickly, which is weird, but whatever. And after they find out that he does not know Elsa in any way, he's just a random stranger in the room, they're like, well, stay, we're having cake. So he stays and eats cake, and then he's getting ready to leave, and he's like, oh, I have to tell her goodbye. And Rebecca's over here like, we normally kiss her on the forehead. Girl. You know that he's a complete stranger. Why are you gonna be like, hey, go over to my friend and kiss her on the forehead right now? Rebecca is not a true friend. I'm just saying. Okay, moving on to chapter 4. I don't have a lot to say, but Tybalt's cousin can go somewhere, okay? He goes, are you coming in? And Tybalt says, not tonight. And his cousin says, I think she'd appreciate it, Tybalt. Tybalt says, I can't face it tonight. And then the cousin comes out of nowhere and goes, you selfish effer. And then he seems satisfied when Tybalt says, hey, I'll come tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. But rude. Okay, I think, this is something I want to talk about really quick. I think it's not fair to call someone selfish for something like this, because he even goes on to the next page. He makes a point where he says, it's hard for me to be around that and all that negativity and all that sadness because I feel like I soak it up like a sponge. And so him wanting to have a moment to himself, that is not selfish, that's self-care, okay? Anyway, rant over. After he leaves his mom, he goes to the bar with his friend Julian and ends up crying hardcore into Julian's chest. It's a moment. He even goes on to say, like, as they're hugging, it's like, I realize that it's several months since I've been this close to another body. That's a weird thing to say. I don't know, it was a strange thing, but like, you haven't hugged your mother recently? Go hug your mother. Alright, chapter 5. We are here, people. We are getting her done. Okay, so chapter 5 starts out with our gal in her hospital bed because she ain't going nowhere, and her parents come in, her nameless parents, and they decide to have a conversation about pulling the plug because that's normal, because that's the right place to have that conversation. I don't know, maybe have that conversation in the hallway, or I don't know, at home, or I don't know, not around your daughter that you're thinking about pulling the plug on. I just thought it was very interesting, especially since they had that tiny conversation and then that was their whole point in the chapter. They left like right after that conversation was over. So they literally walked in the room, were like, we're thinking about killing her, and then they were like, alright, bye daughter, and like left. if I were her parents, right, the doctors haven't done like a brain scan or anything for a while because she hasn't shown that her brain has been going or something. She hasn't shown improvement in any way. So they haven't done a brain scan because it's expensive and blah, blah, blah. But if I were her parents and I was thinking about pulling the plug, I'd be like, hey, maybe we should do one last brain scan to like make sure. And then obviously since she's conscious right now, there'd be something on there, right? So I don't know. Don't just pull the plug without all the information there. That's just me. And after her parents leave, it is shortly after that Tybalt comes back and starts to make himself comfortable. He takes off his shoes. Like, I understand, like, taking off your jacket or whatever, but literally takes off his shoes and just hangs out. I don't even take my shoes off at my grandparents' house, let alone a stranger's hospital room. You nasty. And then he falls asleep again. This isn't a hotel room, Tybalt. And then to end the chapter off on this really great note, he wakes up and it's time for him to leave, and he goes up to her and says, "Come here and let me give you a kiss." And it says, "This kiss is a bit longer than the last one, and as far as I can make out, just about in the middle of my cheek." Oh, did I mention earlier that she can't feel anything? Doesn't that make it weirder? She cannot feel when he kisses her, so she really only knows that he's even touching her if he says something, and I just, no. Anyway, and then he looks down at her and goes, "And look, those aren't lips you've got there. They're like bits of scrunched up old newspaper." So her lips are dry because there's like this several paragraph rant earlier that the narrator makes, and I was wondering why. I wrote a little post-it. I was like, what's the point of this? Because she made this huge rant about how the nurse forgot to put on her lip balm that day and she didn't like having dry lips. And it was all so that way our protagonist Tybalt could come to her rescue and put on lip balm for our protagonist. He was like, "Guess I'm gonna have to use my own," and uses his own lip balm, like puts it on her. Okay. And that is all for chapters 1 through 5. That is all for part 1. All I can say is that I hope it gets better. I'm not gonna say that it's a bad story. It's just not great. The idea is good, it's just the execution is a little off. Like, I don't like that he just randomly came upon her room. Like, there really didn't seem to be a valid reason for him to be there, and he did not act like a normal person would when walking into another person's hospital room. I don't just meander into someone's hospital room, decide to stay a while, read their chart, and be like, this seems like a nice place to chill. That's not what happens. So that was a little off to me, and the whole kissing her on the cheek or whatever. Like I said, I'm not sure of French customs. I know this was written in French originally, so probably taking place in France. But I personally don't like strangers kissing me, and it doesn't matter where it is. But probably especially on my face. So that's all I have to say about that. That being said, I'll see you next week. Bye.